You're listening to the Final Say Radio Show, a Rappaport media production, with your host Brett Rappaport and co-host John Rappaport.
I'm excited, as always. In just a minute, we're going to have Congressman Phil Roe joining us from the great state of Tennessee. And there are very few members of Congress that I respect as much as Congressman Phil Roe. And we're always excited to have him on the program. We're going to discuss a couple of very interesting issues with him. And, of course, it's important that we bring members of Congress on the program to discuss the important bills and things that are going on in Washington. And it's just always a pleasure. And right now in Washington, we've got the immigration bill. We have these gun bills coming through. We have threats from abroad. We've got terrorist issues now. Again, I mean, they don't seem to go away. We've got some very interesting court cases that have been decided by the Supreme Court over the last few days as well. And we're going to discuss some of these things with the congressman. And, of course, as we're bringing them on, I want to remind you the Gang of Eight has introduced the immigration bill, and we do have some problems with it. I mean, I'm trying to figure out why anyone would want to push for amnesty again. It didn't work. Reagan did it. It's been done under Bush or Clinton. I forget which one. So we've done this before. We've been down this road. We've never really properly secured the borders or prevented people from coming in again later. And there's another interesting story aside to this that I want to bring up with the congressman, get his perspective on it. But as I said, I agree wholeheartedly with what Congressman Steve King had said, and I know he's taken a very strong stance on it. I think he's right. Because I think before we ever even get to discussing an immigration bill, we have to talk about national security and securing our borders and the obeyance of our laws before we go about changing or adjusting or adding to any more laws. We need to secure this nation before we do anything else. So those are my thoughts. I was a little surprised and we'll introduce the congressman now. We have Congressman Phil Roe from the great state of Tennessee, and it's always a pleasure. Congressman, welcome back to the Final Say Radio Show. It's only Brett today and Beatrice, so you don't get to have the pleasure of speaking with John.
Brett, I told Beatrice on the way in, I think I went to sleep or was brain dead. I was supposed to call in at 10 after 3, and we apologize for being on late.
Oh, no, never a problem, Congressman. I figured you were having a vote or something, and so never a problem.
Actually, what we were doing was sitting in our office discussing immigration and gun control and all that's going on in the country right now. We were here having a sort of a policy discussion in the office, and I thought, well, we can just continue it on your radio show.
Well, that's great. Why don't we start off with the immigration bill? And let me start by saying this. When I heard the president make the comments calling Congress shameful, and then he made particular comments pointed to the NRA calling them liars and trying to deceive the American people, I just think back to what happened during the whole debacle that we call the Obamacare bill. And I know we weren't going to get into the health care, but let's just get into the process there. He and Nancy Pelosi and everyone else behind that, they weren't honest with the American people about the taxes in it. They told us that it would lower the cost of health care for the average American family. I believe it was $2,400 per family. They told us that it would improve things, that costs would go to, all the things that they promised. And it's been everything but. But what stuck out at me is that how many Americans for years fought against the passage of that bill. There were more Americans that got on buses and came to Washington, D.C., screaming at Congress and the president to not pass that bill, way more than anyone who's calling for immigration and gun control combined. Yet,
by a factor
he makes
of
those
10.
comments.
By a factor of 10.
Yes.
Brett, it's not even close. You look you look out here, and you saw the Gallup poll. You left off the stimulus bill and the stimulus package. If we do that, unemployment won't go above 8%, and so on. Well, clearly that wasn't true, and I don't think that the NRA deliberately misled anybody. Look, I think people have convictions about and concerns. We did a telephone town hall this week, and I have a live town hall back in my district in Parrotsville, Tennessee. It's a little small community. I'm doing about a dozen of these in small communities, not in the bigger ones, but in the little small villages that are around, so that they get a chance to have an opportunity to be with their congressman. And I think it's really important right now with all the uncertainty around the country with the ricin letters, the obviously the terrorist attacks in Boston, that we go back out as leaders and be out with the people that we represent. I intend to do that, and I think most of the congressmen on both sides of the aisle are going to do the same thing. We're not going to let this uncertainty prevent us from doing what we're supposed to do, which is go out and be among the people. But what the president said, I think, is just genuinely incorrect. People have a difference of opinion about this, and if you closely read that bill, and I've got the votes, I'm looking at them right here at my desk. Well, look, these are folks that are some folks from conservative areas. It's not that they're in the NRA's back pocket. It may be their core beliefs that they're worried about. What if this gets started, will it actually? First of all, would it have prevented anything, Brett? And I don't think it would have. I think that's the problem that you get into, is if you really peel this onion back and say, would this have prevented Newtown or Aurora or Virginia Tech? The answer is no, it would not. And as a physician, I have a problem with the problem I had. The biggest problem I had with it was, believe it or not, wasn't the background checks. I've got that background checks till I can't be checked anymore. I've had so many of them, and I've got a concealed carry permit and been checked and so forth. But as a doctor, it was the mental health part of it that bothered me. When a patient is afraid to come in and tell their doctor that they're having maybe a suicidal ideation or they're very depressed at some point in their life, does that go into a data bank where they no longer can ever own a gun? That really worried me, because, I mean, what about the privacy, and what about that physician-patient relationship? And look, I don't know where that slippery slope is where you have people who are terribly unbalanced, that clearly don't need to have weapons. I don't know, and that one bothered me more than anything, because I'm the guy in the examining room that's going to have to figure this out. Do I send this person's name, this patient of mine who came in and confided with me that she may have some issues right now in her life that hopefully we're going to work through, and it's going to be fine. That one bothered me.
Right. Here's a great case. I was reading in a Wall Street Journal. The Supreme Court ruled on whether the police could forcibly administer a blood test to somebody who may have been driving under the influence of alcohol or drugs. In this particular case, it was somebody who was suspected of drunk driving, and it had blown, they drew against his will blood, and it made its way to the Supreme Court, and in 8-1 opinion, the Supreme Court rejected the position, which was backed by Barack Obama and a lot of the states, in fact, saying that, no, you can't, without somebody's permission, take their blood.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking to myself, if you relate that to this issue on the gun control, how could a Supreme Court say, you may know he's drunk, but you still can't take his blood if he doesn't give you permission? But then on the other hand, we could, not the Supreme Court, but as a government, we could look at it and say, but we could put you against your will on a list that you don't want to be on.
Yeah,
and for innocent people who've never done anything wrong.
Never done anything wrong at all, exactly, and will likely never do anything wrong in their life. And that's what, for me, as I said, that was really hard for me just because of what I do. And I know how hard that is for people to come in and own up that, hey, I'm having some issues in my life right now. And and you talk to them about it, and you find out, and they share those things. Well, you think they're going to do that if that's now the next thing I got to do is send you into some data bank? I don't think so.
No, I think it goes against a lot of history that we've had in our medical practices, both psychological and for regular medical purposes. And I don't think it's the solution, actually. I think maybe we can come up with creative ways for people who really, and it should be a discussion, not just a bill that's drafted behind closed doors or by a handful of people. It should be a real long discussion on, well, how do we properly address a situation when somebody reveals to a doctor that I intend to kill somebody or do something that would be harmful to others.
Yeah, they're the obvious things that are out there, Brett, that are easy. Mm-hmm. Those like that are not hard. The real hard thing, though, the hard ones are the ones that are not so. And then where do you stop with that slippery slope? Like I said, when somebody comes in and says, Dr. Rowe, I've been having a tough time. I've gotten a divorce. I'm having my kids are having problems in school. I've been very depressed, and I thought about maybe, I just didn't, I've been through that with lots of people. And do you send them into a data bank? I mean, great goodness, I hope not. I hope we never come to that, because then the patient is never going to come share anything, and I think they are harmed.
Right. I'm more concerned right now of the amount of kids who are placed on drugs. I'm concerned about the genetically modified foods that we're eating now, and a lot of our food sources, because when I look at the autism rates and other things like that are so much higher now than they've ever been, I think we should be looking at these issues. How about hospital infections? How many people die from hospital infections or lose limbs from hospital infections as compared to honest citizens who use their guns and their Second Amendment to harm others, which is very seldom ever happens? Well,
if you look at legal gun owners in Tennessee, it's been almost over 400,000 that are concealed carry permit owners, I should say. It's almost been nobody. It's almost zero. So, basically, if you give somebody or issue a concealed carry permit, you're going to be no harm to anybody. You're using that weapon to protect you and your family, or you're using it to maybe for recreation. To go out and enjoy with your family, target shooting or whatever. You're not the problem.
I know more members of, no offense, I know more members of Congress who have had issues with the IRS or things of that nature than I know people who have had problems with their guns.
Exactly.
If we can we move to the immigration bill? Yeah. I'm sorry,
Brett,
go ahead.
Brett, I think, and I've thought this for a while. I say this to folks, and I sincerely mean this. I don't ever have to buy a lottery ticket. I won the lottery when I was born in America, and I certainly understand why people want to come to this country. It is a land of opportunity. I've been afforded tremendous opportunities, but I was born here. I was lucky I was born here. I have great respect for people who come legally to this country, and I have respect for people who've walked over here, even if they're illegal, and they work. They come and do a job, and most of them are not are here to harm anybody. They're here to work. All that said, it is illegal, and I think until you control the border, until you have at least a semblance of border control, and it is better. I will say it is better than it was in 1986 when amnesty was granted to 3 million people. Certainly better than it was then. The deal was then, Brett, we were going to grant amnesty, but with this amnesty, we were going to do border control and all that. We never did it, and that's Republicans and Democrats never did it. So until you can control the border, it really is not going to matter. The thing that I've also asked is that once you've done whatever you end up doing, I would look at something like a permanent legal status, not a pathway to citizenship, but permanent legal status where somebody is here and there are all kinds of complications and issues. Let me give you an example. If you are if your mother comes here illegally, but you're born here legally, you're a citizen just like I am. The mother is not. So are we going to separate a mother and a child? I kind of doubt that we will. You hear people say, oh, yeah, we'll just send well, they have the same rights. That child has the same rights I have by the Constitution. They're a citizen of the United States. So I think I have problems with people who came here illegally who certainly can get there with a green card holder, which is somebody who has jumped through a bunch of hoops and has permanent legal status. That's what a green card means. And it means you can come here and you can stay here as long as you don't, perform a criminal act or break our laws or the laws that you have too. There, you're supposed to obey the laws also. So if you have a green card, you're here. I think there's going to be a phenomenal debate, and it'll be an interesting one to watch about what's brought forward in the House. And the group in the House has not brought anything forward. So the last question, I'm asking you this one, Brett. If you are here and we haven't enforced these laws up until now as much as we should have, and whatever we end up doing, let's say it's what the Gang of Eight in the Senate does. Let's say that's the law of the land. 10 years, you then get a green card, then you got to learn English, you pay a fine of $500 and any back taxes, and then you can have a pathway to citizenship. Okay, that's what, in a nutshell, that's what it says. Let's say you do all that stuff and you pass it. That's the law. What do you do the next day when somebody comes here illegally and has a baby in this country where the baby is a citizen, the mother is not? Are you going to send her home? Or that's the question. When somebody then comes here later, when the economy gets bad in Mexico or Guatemala, wherever it may be, and people come here and they're here illegally because they've seen we haven't done any, we've actually rewarded that illegal behavior by giving you a pathway to citizenship, what are you going to do the next day? I ask you that question. Are you going to? Are we going to enforce the law? That's what I'm asking.
I have a couple of responses to that one. First, is it the 14th Amendment that
yes
deals?
That's correct.
So, from things that I've read, I don't believe that, because if you're a British citizen and you happen to be on vacation here and you have a baby, it's not an American baby just because you happen to be here. I never really believed in the idea of what, how they refer to it as an anchor baby. I feel that if you're a citizen of another country and you have a child, then that is a child of that other country. So I never myself subscribed to that. Now, I've never called to just round the 11 million people up, if that is the number, and send them back either. And when I look at the issue, I think and I may not be answering your question directly, but I think that, one, we have to have the open discussion without politics being involved. I think we just have to put all the different scenarios, properly analyze the cost, discuss the issue of rule of law, because to me, we're constantly paying fines and penalties to all levels of government for things that we question why they're even laws, yet somebody can come here and violate our most sacred laws, and that is our sovereignty. Because when you illegally cross into a nation and take advantage of its offerings, you're violating the sovereignty of that nation. And to reward them by just saying, okay, mea culpa, everything's fine, you're a citizen, go get free college or whatever other programs we have open and available to you, I think it's just wrong.
Well, here's my question.
Sure.
There's not a lot. The 14th Amendment was put there after the Civil War for slavery. That's why that was put in the Constitution. And we'd have to change the Constitution. I think there are two, and I may be wrong, and our listeners can certainly correct us, but I think Canada and the United States are the only two countries in the world that do that, I think, that grant citizenship if you're born there. And I may be wrong on that, but I think I'm correct on that. My question is, even if we do all this reform and do something with the 11 million folks that are here, many of them are fine people working hard today as we speak. Even if we do that, what are you going to do the next day when somebody comes over here illegally? Are we then going to, with a very great story to tell? I've lived here 5 years. My child is brought here. They don't know them. The story, the scenario here with the dreamer babies. Kids who were brought here as children and have grown up here. Are you going to then enforce the law? That's a question I have, because we'll be looking at 20 years, Brett, with the same exact problem we have today.
You're right, and we are, because Reagan did it, and I believe it was done after Reagan. I don't remember the exact year, but we've been through this process before, and we've never properly secured the borders or enforced the laws. I want to bring up a scenario, because I have very close friends of mine and even family members who have, in some cases, have married somebody from my one cousin had married someone from New Zealand, and she had to go back to New Zealand for 6 months even after they got married before she was able to come back here. And then I have friends who are they're American citizens living here, and they would like to bring a family member over, and they can't. But we're about to, and they're willing to, they fill out the right paperwork, they're on a list, they wait forever. They're willing to come here and work. they're not the kind of people to take advantage of programs and things. They want to come here, work, contribute. They're educated. They're going to end up being good contributors to our nation. And we're not giving the proper path or thought to those people. But yet, I read this, again, to the Wall Street Journal. They want cheap labor. Companies are complaining that this immigration bill doesn't do enough to allow cheap labor into this nation. And then finally, do we have a shortage of jobs?
No.
Or do we have too many people who need jobs?
Well, we've got 12 million people unemployed in this country right now. And let me just give you some data. Immigration is a complicated issue, and with visas and green cards. 40%, this is what they tell us. I just went to an hour-and-a-half briefing the other day on immigration, and 40% of the people they estimate in this country illegally came here legally. Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, I didn't either. These are student visas. There are maybe it's a visitor's visa from another country. There are 37 countries that are admitted to the visa waiver program. They don't have they can stay supposedly in the country as a tourist for 90 days without a visa. Some of them don't go home. They just come and stay. And so 40% of those that are here came here because they got a visa, but they never went back, and we haven't traced them down. We admitted into this country 1,062,000 people last year, permanent residents, immigrants granted permanent residence last year, over 1 million people. And most people, I didn't realize it was that many people. And we have done something on the House side. The Republicans passed a part of our STEM legislation, that's science, technology, engineering, and math, so that more of the educated immigrants could stay here. And I think we have a lottery system. I didn't know that either. 57,000 people can line up around the world and just draw a ticket, kind of like winning the Powerball. You get to come to the U.S. You may not have any skills whatsoever, but you get to come. And this
part I knew.
Yes,
I don't
you didn't
agree
know
with
that.
it.
Yeah, well, that's what we want to look at that and say, hey, if we're going to let 57,000, let's get somebody in here. Let me give you an example. I think it was in 2011, I believe, we educated 42 pediatric neurologists in America, and 21 of them had to leave the country because they couldn't get legal status. And so half of the people we educated here in pediatric neurology, which is a very underserved area in medicine, had to leave the country. So you're correct, and when you point out your friends who have family members and acquaintances and so forth that can't get in. So we've got a stop. And I saw people in India when I was there last year, Brad, last June, and standing out in 113-degree heat to get a visa.
Congressman, we have about 45 seconds left.
Well, I think this immigration debate we're going to have, and it's going to be in detail. I think it'll be a good thing to have, just exactly like the debate on guns was. We are better for that when we're transparent up here and let the American people give us their opinion too.
That's right. I'm all for debate, and even if I hear things I don't agree with, I think they have to be discussed and openly, and as the president had declared when he ran for office, transparently.
Yes.
I'm all for that. Congressman, it's been a pleasure having you as always. I'd love to pick up this debate again soon, and discussion, actually, not debate. But again, it's a pleasure. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Brett. Thanks for having me on.
Okay. Take care. Good luck. God bless. And, folks, that was Congressman Phil Rowe from the great state of Tennessee. And we are at the end of the program, unfortunately. We'll see you again tomorrow, 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time. That is a wrap, folks.